Hello everybody. Welcome to Creating the Basic Adaptable Game Engine Library, Part 48, Starfish Collector 2.0. Well, we've added a lot of things to our library, a lot of new functionality since Starfish Collector 1.0. It's looking a lot more polished. So in this video, we're just going to put a few finishing touches on. There's always more features we can add, but we would like to move on to other games eventually. So let's go ahead and go over to the code and see what we can add to polish this up a bit. So here we are back with IntelliJ. We go ahead and run the Starfish Collector game. And right now we've got our fish which kind of swims around. That's a nice little bit of decoration there. And let's see. We got those starfish which move for a little bit and then just stop. That's a little bit odd. So maybe we'll fix some of the starfish motion. And in fact, one thing I'd really like to do is I'd like to make the starfish fade out over time, right? Rather than just like disappearing in a snap, I'd like them to kind of slowly fade out. And we haven't really tested that action yet. So let's go ahead and let's clean some things up in the code. Maybe we'll add some more fish too. I really like that little swimming fish. All right, so in the Starfish Collector game, let's go to the part where we set up these starfish. And so in starfishcollector.java, it's going to be, see, instead of maybe doing this was fun to test things out, but let's just keep those starfish rotating. And let's also have them rotate at different rates, right? So we'll add a little bit of randomness in there. So we'll do an action.forever, and then we'll say action.rotate by. And we'll want it to do a full rotation, but then we'll want to specify some amount of time, and maybe we'll make that a random number. Let's see, maybe between 2 and 3 seconds. So let's say math.random plus 2. Right, so math.random gives us a number from 0 to 1, add 2, that'll give us a number between 2 and 3. And so they'll appear to be rotating at different rates. Okay, let's see. What else could we add to the starfish? Right, so set position, we've given them random sizes, they'll all look a little bit different. Maybe, you know what, maybe we'll even start them at different angles as well. Let's say starfish.setAngle to be math.random times 360. And so they all start off at different angles as well as rotating at different rates. And so that'll look a little bit better. I really like that fish. So where's that code which has the fish in it? All right, let's turn this into a for loop. Let's see. This is kind of interesting. Where does fish get declared? Fish is a variable up here. Why is the fish variable declared up here rather than a local variable? Do we do anything with it in the update method? I don't think that we do. Right, so let's go ahead and instead of making fish a class level variable, right, since it's really just scenic decoration, kind of like the ocean, let's change the way this code is written. Let's set up a int variable, fish count. Right, and that'll be, I don't know, let's add in 6 fish. Hopefully that won't make our ocean too crowded. And let's say for int I equals 0, I less than fish count, I plus plus. And let's encapsulate all this code in here. Now we need to say sprite fish. For each fish, let's give them a random position. Right, let's say math.random. Since they're going to wrap around the screen, I don't really need to worry about keeping them away from the edges. We'll say math.random times 800 and math.random times 600. And that'll put them at some random location on the screen. And let's see, for each of these fish, let's create a random angle as well. So double angle equals math.random times times 360. And let's set their motion angle and the angle that they're facing to be that random value. You know what? Why don't we give them a random speed as well? Let's say double speed is equal to math.random, let's say between 100 and 200. Right, so math.random is between 0 and 1, times 100 is between 0 and 100. Add 100 to those values, you'll get a random number between 100 and 200. And so now all of our fish should look slightly different. Right, so yeah, this is looking pretty cool. Right, we've got this fish animation. You know, I can actually reuse the animation for all of these fish. So I could declare this outside this variable. Kind of like we reused the texture for the starfish. Right, we can reuse the animation for the fish. Now this does mean all the animations will be synced. If you wanted two different animations playing at or if you wanted animations playing at different speeds or starting at different times, then you would need to create new animation objects. And we will talk about that in the next game that we create. But for now, we can just recycle this animation for all of our fish characters. All right, so we have our fish at a random position. They all use this animation. We've got some random physics set up. Each fish is going to wrap to the screen and we add it to the group. This is looking good. We should have a virtual school of fish swimming around our game. And we fixed the starfish spinning. So let's check those out. And they don't really affect the gameplay, but it's going to be nice. Look at those little fish go. Oh, that's pretty cute. Oh, one thing that I'm noticing here. Those little fishy tails are actually wiggling really fast. And you know why that is? That's because, right, the same animation is used in each fish, but for each of those animations, or each time the animation is updated, right, the same delta t is being added to each one of those fish. So maybe we should fix that before we go on any further. So probably the best way to do that, after some consideration, is we really don't want to keep reloading this image into memory, right? We can use the same image, right, still broken up into the same number of rows and columns, right? Just each new animation needs to have its own elapsed time. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add a clone method to the animation class. Again, it lets us recycle the image or the texture which is being used, but it gives each animation its own elapsed time value. Right, so we have public animation. Right, what I really want is a clone method. Right, so let's write this down at the bottom. So public void, not public void, but public animation clone. Right, so this is going to create a new animation, and it's going to use all the same things that we have stored in this animation, except it's going to have its own reference to elapsed time. So again, we're sharing basically all the data, except for elapsed time. So first we'll set up a new animation, and I think here we're going to use this, we're going to use this value right here, right, default constructor. So let's say animation A is equal to a new animation. But then we're going to start copying over the data that we need. So we can say a.textureList equals this.textureList. Right, so we're not duplicating the image in memory. We'll say what else do we need? Frame duration equals this.frame duration. We'll say what? A.elapsed time. Right, so a.elapsed time is going to be equal to this.elapsed time. We'll say, what's next? Autocomplete is our friend here, a.loop. Right, that should be equal to this.loop. Are there any other instance variables we need here? we probably don't need pause. We can set that to the default value. Actually, you know what? We technically don't need to copy the elapsed time either. In fact, we definitely don't want to. We want that to stay at the default value of 0. Right, we just need these values right here. All right, and then we need to return this new animation. Right, so we'll return A. Let's go back to Starfish Collector. And instead, let's say fish animation is going to be a clone of that animation object. Right, now those tails should be wiggling at a more reasonable speed, right? So each one is going to get its own elapsed time to update. All right. Let's try running that again. Let's watch our fish swim across the screen. Yep, and that looks more like the speed that we're kind of used to for those fish swimming across. All right, so graphically this is looking good. The last thing I'd like to do is I'd really like to add in some kind of a fade out effect whenever you collect one of these starfish. So we'll go ahead and add that next. And so the next thing I'd like to do, actually this is going to be a little bit surprisingly complicated, I think, because the idea is going to be, right now, when the turtle overlaps a starfish, right, the starfish is automatically removed, right? And in this case, we don't want to automatically remove it. We want to add an action, right? We want to add a fade out action, which happens over the course of 1 second. However, we only want to do that once, right? So what we're going to do, so we have to be clever about this. So maybe we'll have it keep spinning while it's rotating. One approach we could use for this would be when it overlaps, check if we've already added, I guess, a particular action. There's not a really good way to do this. You know what we're going to do? I was wondering if we would have to do this eventually, so we might as well do it now. The starfish are really going to need to contain an extra bit of data. Right? In particular, we want to know if a starfish has already been collected, so we don't accidentally keep adding fade out actions to it. Now, where would we store this extra data for a starfish, indicating it's already been collected? Right? There's 2 ways we could do that. One way is we could actually extend the sprite class, create a brand new class called starfish. But in this case, I'd like to do a different approach. Right? I'd like to add one more thing to the sprite class. I'd like to add a way to store some additional data in it. Right? So in this case, I'll just add a public object called data. And so I'm keeping this very general. So data could be all sorts of different pieces of information. Right? So object is the type from which all other types are extended. Right? So I could add a Boolean or whatever we wish. So in this case, so public object data, I've added that to the sprite class. Let's go over to Starfish Collector. Right? And so here's what I'd really like to do. So if turtle overlaps a starfish, right? In this case, instead of removing it, I'd like to say, let's comment that out for a second. I'd like to say starfish dot add action, and this is going to be an action dot fade out. It'll fade out over the course of a second. And I'd also like to say starfish dot data is equal to true. In this case, the data represents the fact that it's collected. And I need to initialize that to false. Right, so let's go up to where fish are set. Now let's also say fish.data is equal to false. Let's put a little note for ourselves here. Data answers the question, has the starfish been collected yet? All right, so initially they have not yet been collected. Then down here in this method, the data is equal to true, right? So indicate that this starfish has been collected. Right? So if it's already been collected, right, we don't want it to continuously keep overlapping. Well, the turtle keeps overlapping the starfish. We don't want to keep on adding fade out actions. Right? So what we'll do here is turtle overlaps the starfish, and the starfish data is false, which in this case means it should be a double equals, right? So in this case, it means that it has already been collected, and I actually need to cast that to a Boolean. Right, so I need to cast the whole thing, the starfish data. Right, so if the starfish is not yet being collected, we want to add an action to it. And let's see, maybe once it's collected, we'll also stop it from spinning. So let's also say starfish.actionList.clear. And there's a really good reason to do this as well, because we still do need to remove the starfish at some point. Let's say we're going to remove the starfish when this action has finished. Right, so we've cleared the action list. We've added this, but we know it's going to be done in 1 second. Right, so down here, right, we can also say, after the if statement, let's say if the starfish fish.actionList.size is equal to 0, right? Because when fade out is done, that will be removed and there will be no actions left. In that case, we'll remove the starfish from the group. Oh, and that's not tarfish, but starfish. All right. Theoretically, it might be easier in the future, maybe we'll work on this in another video, to have some kind of a remove action. Right? But that's something I hadn't thought about, so we're not going to put that in this video right now. This should be everything that we need. All right, so let's see if fading out works. I hope so. It'll be a really nice polished effect if this is done correctly. All right, and something is continuing to run here, so something's not quite right. Let me think about this. All right, I love being able to pause the video when I'm recording, that way you don't have to see me look up and down the code. The problem was actually earlier up here. It's not the fish that get collected, but the starfish get collected. So, in our initialization method, we need to move this bit of code. Right, so again, there was actually a null pointer exception. I don't know if you can read that. It was null because data was never set for starfish. Right, so I want to say, right after adding this action, maybe we'll say starfish.data equals false. Now let's give that a try. Right, things are compiling, things are running, and all right, it actually worked. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to collect this starfish right here. Right, it stops running and then it fades out, which is kind of a really nice effect there. So those starfish are just fading away. Very cool. All right. So, oh, I've got one more starfish to collect. Go ahead and get that one. Hey, we got it. And we win the game. Very good. All right. So that is Starfish Collect. Wait a second. Starfish left equals 1. I was about to say that's it. But no, we need to fix that problem. Why did that not get updated? Right, so let's go down to the developer's game is never done. Oh, you know what? It's because we update the text up in here. Really, that text should be updated after removing a starfish from the group. All right, that looks a lot better. Okay, so now we're done with this code. And that's going to wrap it up for Starfish Collector 2.0. Now, there's always more features that you can add to this game, right? So what are some things you could use to test your knowledge of the basic adaptable game engine library so far? Well, here's some features I was thinking of that I won't make videos about, but maybe you could try. So, for example, you could add shark movement, right? Maybe you want to make that shark move across the screen kind of like the fish. And also, maybe there should be a penalty for touching that shark. Right? I don't think turtles and sharks are really friends in real life, so maybe you could add some kind of a game over functionality. Right? If the turtle touches the shark, then the game is over. In which case, maybe you want to make that shark smaller, especially if you decide to add multiple sharks. Right? Maybe you could have them move across the screen and wrap in kind of the same way that the fish do. You could also add an additional challenge. What about a time limit? Right? Maybe you have 30 seconds to collect those starfish while those sharks are swimming around the screen. Right? And I'm sure if you think for a few minutes, you can come up with even more ideas. And hopefully, the basic adaptable game engine library will prove itself to be adaptable enough to add those ideas you have to keep improving this game. Right? Starfish Collector is really at its heart just a very basic template, a canvas that you can improve upon and make better. So that's going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed making Starfish Collector 2.0, and starting with the next video, we're going to see just how adaptable this game engine library is, and we're going to start creating another game. Thanks for watching.